Hey there, students. Tom Richey here at the Marco Learning Studio, and I'm going to give you a quick introduction or pre-exam review to Unit 1 in the AP U.S. History course and exam description, preparing you for what's coming up on the exam and the prime things that you need to focus on during this period. Now, period 1 goes from 1491 to 1607. We need to note that 1491 is a symbolic year. 1492, of course, is when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. 1491 is a symbolic year noting pre-contact Native American societies. So let's note that this course does not begin with Columbus. It actually begins before that. And then period 1 ends in 1607 with the founding of Jamestown. So in the next unit, we are going to be looking at British North America, but here we're going to be looking at Native American societies and initial European contact. Now, let's remember that this is part of the course, but it's only going to be about 5% of the exam. It won't be in the DBQ topic. It will be one of 3 LEQs, and there is only one possible SAQ, and you'll be able to choose between SAQ 3 and SAQ 4. So let's not spend too much time here. We'll want to move on, but we want to make sure that we get all of the points that we can. So first of all, we need to look at pre-contact and early contact Native American societies. And the first thing that we need to understand is that Native American societies were diverse. They were frequently at war with each other. They spoke different languages. They had different cultures depending on regions. We want to also understand that these societies were very diverse in the way that they procured food. They were not all hunters and gatherers. They practiced agriculture. They were much more advanced than the average American tends to understand. So we want to note the diversification of these societies and also that they're not just hunting and gathering and that there are regional differences. Now, one thing that we see is maize cultivation, M-A-I-Z-E. This is not like a maize, but then again, when you think about the corn maze around Halloween, it's a play on words, okay? So corn, what Americans refer to as corn, is maize, and this is pretty much how they fed themselves as far as breads and cereals, was corn agriculture, and they also cultivated squash and beans and did so a bit differently than Europeans. This isn't putting things in rows and going with plows and stuff like that. Now, we also want to note that you've got Plains Indians that are in the Great Plains or the Great Basin, and they are hunting buffalo on horseback. Now, we're going to talk about the Columbian Exchange in a bit, but we want to note here that Europeans did impact the lifestyles of Native Americans. So the Plains Indian culture was directly impacted by European contact with the introduction of the horse. We want to note that Native American societies in the Southeast, on the Atlantic coast, and much of the Northeast and also the Northwest, that these Indians are also practicing agriculture, and especially in the Northwest, fishing, employing the resources of the ocean for a very diversified diet. So understand that there are lots of settled communities, and one of these examples of settled communities would be the Mississippian culture when we look at the Southeast along the Mississippi River, and one of the biggest examples of this, if you want an illustrative example, is Cahokia, which is around modern-day St. Louis. The next thing we want to look at are European motivations for exploration and colonization. And we're going to have 3 reasons here. First of all is the search for new sources of wealth. The New World was rich in resources that could be taken back and could be traded. And so they're looking for new sources of wealth. Now, also, there is competition and rivalry between European powers that once Spain and Portugal start colonies in the New World, then we have France and England and the Netherlands. They also begin doing this. So these European countries are all competing with each other. And third, we want to look at the spread of Christianity, that they are looking to Christianize the natives. Now, some more than others. We want to note that we're going to be comparing some of these colonizers. So when you look at the European colonizers, for example, the French and the Spanish, which were both Catholic, they had organized programs of evangelism, whereas you've got the British and the Dutch, who are more concerned about, about economics than they are about evangelizing. And the English and the Dutch are also Protestant. Now, also, we want to note the different economies. So the Spanish had an economy that was based on labor, based on Indian labor. We'll talk about that in a second. The French and the Dutch were more focused on trade, particularly the fur trade. And then when we look at the English, they're focusing on agriculture. Now, of course, the Dutch and the English, especially the English, the reason I'm speaking to you right now in English, and you have to take your AP exam in English, is unlike the French and the Spanish, who sent very few colonists and very few women, the English are bringing families, and colonists are coming in large numbers. Now, that is also impacting how each of these colonizers interacted with native populations, whereas the Spanish were focused on using Indian labor and also converting them to Christianity. Then the French are also trying to convert natives to Christianity, but they're focused on the fur trade, which is an equal exchange, okay? So even though there are a lot of natives who died, most of them because of European diseases that were brought unintentionally, we also want to note that the French had a friendly relationship with the natives, and these relationships that were formed between the colonizers and the natives, they weren't purely exploitive, okay? And that the natives actually had agency, especially when the relationship is based on trade. Now, the English, who are practicing agriculture and starting large farms, they are the most distant, and they want the Indians to get out of their way. So we want to make sure to look at the motivations for colonization, but also being able to compare the European colonizers. Next, we move on to the Columbian Exchange. Now, the Columbian Exchange is something you're going to need for any AP history subject, whether you're taking APUSH, World, or Euro, and that is the exchange of goods, animals, ideas between the New World and the Old World. Now, don't try to come up with an exhaustive list of things that are exchanged. Think about a few things from the Old World, a few things from the New World, okay? So, for example, from the Old World, from Europe and Africa, we have different plants and different animals. So for example, livestock, okay? Horses and cattle. These are coming from the Old World, that the Europeans are bringing these with them. Now, then we go on to North America and we see the turkey. All right, the turkey, which is, we think about Thanksgiving, a very American holiday, and the turkey is coming from America. Now, when we're looking at crops that are coming over, I think about from the Old World, bananas. I tell you, I love Minions. You know, we're like banana. Okay, now these are coming from the Old World, but remember, bananas grow very well in Central America. So even though it was an Old World crop, bananas and sugar, those are coming from the Old World, but they're going to the Americas. Now, meanwhile, we see tomatoes and potatoes. Those are things you think about; those have influenced French and Italian cuisine. Those come from the New World back to the Old World. And let's also remember that diseases were part of these exchanges. Europeans brought diseases with them that Native Americans had no immunity from, and that, of course, had a devastating effect in terms of the death toll on these native societies. We want to take a special look at the Spanish Empire, knowing about the encomienda system. The encomienda system was a system of forced labor that existed in the Spanish colonies. Now, this system of forced labor was, of course, controversial because it went against some of the other goals. So the Europeans wanted to extract wealth, but at the same time, they wanted to convert the natives to Christianity. So Bartolomé de las Casas, who was a Spanish priest, wrote about the abuses of the Spanish and petitioned the government to change its policy, which it eventually did. Now, the Spanish also had a caste system that developed there, and the caste system was based on two things: where are you from, and what is your racial composition. So the people who were at the very top, these were the people who were full-blooded Spanish, and they came from the Spanish mainland, the peninsula. They're called peninsulares. And so then you will get into the Creoles, which were people who were of Spanish blood, but they were born in the colonies. They were seen as less than the people who came from Spain. And then you've got the mestizos, the people in the colonies who were of mixed race, and then finally the Indians. So note that there is this caste system that developed based on race and also your place of origin. And that wraps up our review of Period 1,